So we're going to talk about unconventional influence. We'll call it just UI for short, UI self, where we learn to max your complexity, and space. So an elite team is made up of individuals that have become extremely proficient at the following things: self-regulation, clear communication, and relentless focus on the objective. Clear self-regulation, the ability to regulate yourself, and we'll go over it right here. Self-regulation is an intentional use of complexity and space to control your behavior and your thoughts. Now, as we use this, you can't influence others unless you can influence yourself, and you influence yourself by being able to regulate your emotions, using them to your advantage. So this is me on the top of a mountain in Colombia. I was out there. It was not an easy mission. I'd been deployed there for a PSYOP operation, was working out of the embassy, U.S. embassy there. And I was actually living, at this time, I was living with the Colombian army. And I was living in their barracks with the Colombian soldiers. I had one other U.S. counterpart with me. And we were going through their Colombian PSYOP program. This program was intensive. It was in Spanish, all Spanish, and they spoke very fast. I'm fluent, but it was difficult, to say the least. And the training was difficult, not physical, but mentally taxing. And so I took a break on kind of one of our times off. I went up to the top of a mountain with my buddy, and I journaled. And this is often what I do, what I turn to when I need to get clarity in my thoughts and kind of understand and see how I'm thinking. So I pulled out my journal. I started to reflect and started to think about my experience there. Let's talk about mastering complexity. These are some lessons I learned from the SEAL teams. So developing composure on the far side of chaos. If you look at this is normal distribution. We've got degrees of chaos on the left, composure underneath. And you look at this distribution here, you see on the left, we've got minimum composure, on the right, maximum composure. And in the middle, you've got the chaos. We all have it. We wake up in the morning. We have our work, kids, spouse, phone, email, media, bills, social media dinging if we got the notifications turned on, and it's crazy. We wake up immediately, especially if we wake up a little later by hitting snooze, we wake up on that left side of composure. It's almost like a wave that we can't get through, or like a wall that we can't pass, because we're not ahead of the chaos. Whereas what I found, to get me ahead of that chaos, I just got up a little bit earlier, started to knock out some work a little bit earlier when no one else was up. And it allowed me to get ahead of that chaos. It allowed me to get to the right of and to the positive side of the composure continuum there. So developing composure on that far side of chaos requires sometimes getting up a little earlier or doing pre-work and preparation so that you don't have the chaos of the day overwhelming you right out of the gates. Let's talk about space. So we just talked about complexity. Let's talk about space. Lessons from Viktor Frankl. He was a famous psychologist and was also imprisoned in the Nazi war camps. He wrote a book called The Man's Search for Meaning. He said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So if you look at it, you've got the event and you've got the emotion from that event. So what Victor's talking about here in space, mastering space, is being able to create that space. Now, again, for me, I just woke up a little earlier. You may meditate, or you may do something else to clear your mind to get ahead of the chaos. But whatever it is, to master that complexity, you must create space between the event and the emotion. When I was on top of that mountain in Colombia, I was journaling about the lack of space and all the complexity in my life. I was thinking about what was going on at home, how my family was. I was thinking about the operation. Were we going to be able to connect with all the different cadre there and with the commander and be able to teach what we had to teach and pass the course with honors, right? We were there as representatives of our country. And so all this complexity, I had very little space. So I went to the top of a mountain and I journaled. That allowed me to get ahead of the complexity, to create space. And then I use the journal as a tool to write down and monitor my thoughts, so I could see the feelings that I was feeling and the thoughts and stories that were happening as a result of those thoughts, and maybe of previous narratives and stories that had happened to me prior to this, maybe things that had popped up from before, from my history, whatever it was. If we don't work those out first, and we don't create space and master that complexity, it's going to be very hard to have clear decision making and be able to complete the mission effectively.